Welcome back to Raised by Giants Illuminated Insights discussion. We are live. Welcome everyone in the chat. Good to see you guys and any moderators out there. We have a very amazing discussion for you guys today here with returning co-host Trey Hudson. But first, a huge shout out to Gigi for her support on Buy Me a Coffee. Thanks so much for your kindness and support of the show. It means a lot to me and lets me to continue to bring you guys better and better content like the discussion we're going to have here today with former DoD and Army Intelligence Security Specialist Trey Hudson. But a reminder that Super Chats and Super Stickers are available, and any Super Chat and Super Sticker will be read out live during the show. And also PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description as well and are always appreciated. Couldn't do this without your guys' support. So now a huge welcome back to the show, former DoD and U.S. Army Military Intelligence, Anti-Terrorism, Counterintelligence, and Security Specialist, recently retired, Trey Hudson. Welcome back to the show. It's good to see you, brother. How's it going?
Hey, everybody. It's going great. Just kind of chilling out here in the living the dream as a federal retiree, drawing those big retirement checks. No, life is good. Life is good. Getting to kind of refocus on, some of the esoteric research that I've been doing, extracurricular. So, yeah, everything's great. Everything is really good.
That's great. I'm really happy to hear it. And so for a refresher, I know that you've been on the show a couple of times, but for the audience, what does a security specialist for the military do exactly?
Right. A security specialist is actually, let me back up. I was a Army intelligence officer, uniform wearing Army guy for a while. And then I transitioned over into the civilian sector, which is a federal employee, like your mailman, except I work for Department of Defense. And what a security specialist does is somebody that is responsible for the administration of security practices, procedures, and elements to protect assets or information. Now, you have security specialists. When I first started my career, I was what was called a physical security specialist, which means I was the guy that protected widgets, where the widgets that I kind of oversaw and managed happened to be weapons of mass destruction. So, I had a site that had about 7% of our nation's chemical weapons stockpile. So I was responsible for overseeing and managing the security for that. And then I had a chance to get back to my roots in intelligence and transferred over into what's called CP35 or intelligence. The previous career program was 19, which was physical security and security, law enforcement security. Then I moved over to the intelligence side of security. My position was designated as a GG General Government position in the intelligence community, and I became responsible for protecting classified material, information, assets, things like that. And then I retired as a supervisory security specialist at one of our Department of Defense's organic industrial bases. A lot of folks don't know that DoD has factories that build widgets and things. And so I was the head of chief of security and intelligence at this facility. So I would do stuff like intelligence, counterintelligence. We would vet people for their clearances. If people had problems, they would come to us. That's actually something that popped up here recently with Mr. Roush. The thing popped out saying, "Oh, he had some mental health issues. How can he have a clearance?" Well, absolutely, people, that have mental health issues can get treated and get cured and regain their clearance. I mean, I've worked with quite a few cases like that. So it's not that big of a deal. So that's kind of what I did. And I worked. I have to put a caveat out there. During the course of this discussion, I can neither confirm or deny that I've ever been involved directly in any special access programs. Take that for what it's worth. I can't confirm. I can't deny. So I'll put that out there. So people can read between the lines of that. However, is I have been to a lot of schooling for security of special access programs. There's 3 levels of courses taught by the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency through their Center for the Development of Security Excellence in Elk Ridge, Maryland. So I've been to a lot of courses on that, and so have some experience in that kind of stuff. So basically, it sounds really cool, sounds really sexy. Basically, it's a bunch of paperwork and trying to herd cats. So that's pretty much what a government security specialist does.
So you basically were in charge of the classification process of certain documents, correct?
No, that's it's kind of weird, and this is a little bit of an education for everybody. Is the people that actually classify this stuff and I cannot remember the executive order off the top of my head. Obama updated the executive order back when he was in office, but it's an executive order that actually creates the information security program. The InfoSec program, which develops the procedures and the criteria for classifying confidential, secret, and top secret information, and then sub-elements like special access program, special compartment information, is actually a presidential program created by executive order. So it's the president's program. He owns all the information that's classified. And then he appoints certain positions subordinate to him that have what's called OCA, or Original Classification Authority. And these are men and women based on their position that can look at some information, say, I think that this needs to be classified. They have to communicate those classification decisions in something called an SCG, a Security Classification Guide. So everybody knows how to protect this information. Now, I'll give you an example. The Central CENTCOM commander, Central Command commander that was over Afghanistan, Iraq, he had Original Classification Authority, OCA. He could say, okay, I want all plans involving the moving of logistics, materials, and weapons into theater, into Afghanistan, into Iraq. That has to be classified at the secret level. His staff publishes a security classification guide that goes out to all the security weenies in the world. And all we do is we take that SCG and we can determine if the information that we have is classified, and we can properly mark it. So what we're doing is we're doing something called derivative classification, where we're deriving our authority from the OCA down through the security classification guide. So what I would do is we would have products that we would develop. Like I might, the commander might say, okay, Trey, I need to know, what's the intelligence threat to this particular widget that we're working on. And then I would go out into the classified world, and I would pull down different data points and reports and all, and I would develop a point paper. And then I would take the guidance from the security classification guide, crosswalk the classification, secret to secret, confidential to confidential, unclassified to unclassified, and build a classified document and stamp the top and bottom, and then present that product to whoever the consumer is. So there's different tiers of authority. A OCA, through the appointment by the president, can actually look at a piece of information and say, based on my authority, knowledge, and experience, that needs to be classified. As long as they communicate that, then everything's cool. That's why, the idea of a president disclosing classified information. The president doesn't disclose classified information. It's his information. He can disclose it anytime he wants, just by saying, I don't think that's classified anymore. A good example of that is during the Carter administration. President Carter had a little bit of a bungle where he compromised the identity of some sensitive assets, personnel that were feeding information to the U.S. Intelligence community. And people are like, well, he disclosed that information illegally. Well, it was really dumb, but it was his information to disclose. Now, people probably ended up getting killed over that. But so anyway, it's a really weird system. A lot of people don't understand how it works. It's very convoluted. And like I said, they have special schools, other than just the special access programs. They have collateral schools for confidential, secret, and top secret that you go to. You spend several weeks there in Ithaca, Maryland, learning this stuff.
Is there other classifications besides confidential, secret, and top secret? Because there's this thing within the community that people think that special access programs and that there's a level above top secret clearance and that it all revolves around these reverse engineering of crashed alien technology and all that. So could you comment on that really quick?
There are 3 levels of classification. Confidential, by definition, is information, if improperly disclosed, would cause damage to the national security. Secret information, if improperly disclosed, would cause serious damage to the national security. And top secret information, if disclosed, would cause seriously grave damage to the national security. There is no level higher than top secret. However, there is compartmentalization. Now, you might have a program that involves whatever. Let's say we're building a missile, hypersonic missile that's stealth. I'm just speculating. I'm just making that up. Is that program, let's call that rampant orange. RO is the code word for that program. You might have information that's marked top secret / rampant orange. And that means only people that are read into the rampant orange program can have access to that compartmentalized information. But that information is no more sensitive than top secret. So you'll never see like rampant orange just as a header on a document. It would always be top secret rampant orange, secret rampant orange, things like that. There's only 3 levels: confidential, secret, and top secret. There is nothing above top secret. People, whenever I hear people use that term, I want to pull my hair out, because you might have, there were some, compartments in both the SCI, special compartment information, and special access programs that are code word programs, but never higher than top secret. No.
Now, what would a program be classified under that has been privately contracted out to private contractors like Raytheon and Bigelow Aerospace? And
absolutely. Very good question. A really neat book that I encourage people to get if they're even remotely interested in this. If it kind of peels back the veneer on this and lets you kind of peek into how the sausage is made, is Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. It talks about how through the work of Senator Reed and some others and Robert Bigelow, is they set up a contract, a classified contract. Classified contracts are issued on something called a DD Form 254. And that creates a classified contract, tells you what level. And then if that goes into the SAP arena, is you will have a program security office that's a DoD official called a program security officer. And what that person does is they oversee how the contractor handles special access information material. And every SAP program, the information is processed or the widgets are manufactured in something called a SAP-F, or Special Access Program Facility. And then you will have an individual that's either a government SAP security officer, GSSO, or CSSO, contractor SAP security officer, that's actually in charge of the running of that special access program facility. Who comes and goes, what information is brought in, how do they manufacture the widget, vetting the people, reading them into the programs, reading them out of the programs when they leave. So the GSSO is or CSSO is the person actually with boots on the ground, making things happen to ensure the integrity of these programs. Classified contracts are issued something called a CAGE code through the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, and that's actually a alphanumeric code that people can go in and verify, that they are in fact contracted to do this information. But reading the Skinwalkers of the Pentagon, reading through it and looking at it, I'm like, okay, yeah, they're getting all of this right. It's this weird, convoluted way that you set up a collateral program, secret, top secret, and then you compartmentalize a certain portion of it, set up a SAP-F, and go that route.
So in other words, being able to take these special access programs through a private organization or a private group, they would never have to come clean about any of these special access programs, even if they were declassified or unclassified.
Good point. Very good point. Here's some of the caveats on that. Is a person read into a special access program, either on the government side, a government worker or a contract worker, goes through the same vetting process as anybody else. They sign the same non-disclosure statements, and as long as that program is still valid and the Undersecretary of Defense has not done something called de-establishment, as long as it's still a valid program, is you still are required by law to protect the information that you gathered during the course of your tenure working on that program. You still have to protect it. Now, if a program is de-established, and we talked about, our, what did I say, rampant orange or whatever. Let's say that's de-established as a special access program and it's degraded to collateral secret. You still have to protect it as secret information. You're just not compartmentalizing it anymore. Now, let's say years down the road, and I've seen this, is these programs no longer have value to national security. This information, if disclosed, would not damage national security. We're seeing some stuff like during the Vietnam War that's now being declassified. Then what happens is once that's declassified, the original classification authority has to communicate that to everybody. This information is now declassified, and it can be declassified down to something called, oh, my mind has been completely blank. CUI, controlled unclassified information, which used to be known as FOU, or official use only, or completely unclassified, which means it can be released to anybody anywhere. If information is considered unclassified, if it's not classified or protected as controlled unclassified information, by law, that information has to be released to any requester under the Freedom of Information Act under FOIA.
Really quick, Gigi asked a question that she wanted you to go into a little bit more about the Jimmy Carter leak and where was it, and if you had any of the names of the people that he revealed the information about.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not quite as old as I look. I was still pretty young during the Carter administration. It was during a speech, and I would have to go back and research. And I'm sorry, Gigi, it just off the top of my head, I don't remember the specific. It was a speech to either a U.S. or international group, and he alluded to programs that we were using to collect intelligence against foreign nations. And in the the effort of doing that, he disclosed their identities. The information that he publicly put out here, that the counterintelligence agency of these countries could narrow it down and figure out how this information is getting out. So it should, a good Google search should come up with that.
Firefly said, so the theoretical 35 levels above the president are BS?
Yes, absolutely. Matter of fact, it's such BS, I can smell it through the screen. No, I mean, it's like anything else. Is secret, confidential, secret, and top secret, and that's it. And the only person that has the authority to even create this information security program is the president. Now, does that mean there's not stuff that's going on sub rosa that the president does not know about? Yes, absolutely. There are nefarious actors in Department of Defense and in just about every governmental agency that are doing very naughty things against the American public they shouldn't do. Now, if they set up an unauthorized, this is where this gets interesting. If they set up an unauthorized program that's not being run under the auspice of the executive order, then it's not a legitimate program. Now, would the president know about that? Maybe not. That's the thing about the some of the disclosure stuff that's come out here recently with Mr. Grouch. Is he is alluding to something that might be a program that's not being run properly and within the confines of federal law. So I think that's kind of what that whistleblower thing might have been about.
Yeah, that was the only interesting thing about that entire congressional testimony was the talk of a special access program that it's above congressional oversight. That's literally the only thing. But people have been talking about that for a really long time, Trey. People have been talking about how these programs are funded, that they're overcharging for certain programs and funneling that money into some sort of other special access program. So it's really nothing new, but it was something that kind of slipped by that piqued my interest within the congressional testimony. The rest of it is a waste of time for me.
Yeah, it was. Well, and I think you hit on something that's very important is, his testimony. And I was, I didn't get a chance to watch a testimony. I think I was taking a nap, like as a retiree at the time. But I read the transcripts and all. And I'm like, okay, if I am, I was an intelligence guy, and I hear somebody talking about a program. Okay, and there's talk inside of the intelligence community, and sometimes people that aren't read into programs pick up bits and pieces, indicators of other stuff going on. And I thought that this program was being done illegally. There are three types of SAPs in the world. There's acknowledged, there's unacknowledged, and there's waived. An acknowledged SAP is, and I'll give you an example, the stealth technology on our current fighter aircraft. That's protected under a special access program. The actual technology of that, how they put the composites together and all of that. We acknowledge that that's protected as a special access program. We don't talk about the code work, but that's an acknowledged SAP. And then you have something called an unacknowledged SAP, which we don't acknowledge to the public. People that are working on these programs, if they travel to meetings and symposiums, the supporting counterintelligence entity might give them alternate pass or IDs, passports, driver's license, and stuff like that. So when they check into their hotel or the conference, they're not who they say they are. Example, if we talked about a hypersonic missile, stealth missile, if you had a dude that's an expert on ramjet technology, you had another dude that's a expert on guidance systems, and another dude that's an expert on stealth technology, all three of these guys were meeting in the same small town outside of the Dugway Proving Ground in the same hotel. The intelligence operatives that are monitoring that would say, okay, stealth, ramjets, guidance system. They're working on a hypersonic missile. So you would have these guys travel under assumed identities with legitimate paperwork, but with different names. So that would be an unacknowledged SAP. Those are line items in the DoD budget, classified, but these are line items. When you get into something called unacknowledged SAPs, it starts getting a little spooky. These are not budget items, and these the budgets for these programs are siphoned out of other programs or other budgets. But they do have congressional oversight. You have the senior ranking and the ranking member of the Senate, of the controlling party, the non-controlling party senior member of both the House and the Senate, and then the two top folks in both the defense and the intelligence committees. So there is congressional oversight, and they are read into these programs because they have to be. I mean, that's the constitutional duty of Congress, is to control the purse strings, regardless of whether the stuff is classified or not. That's where I think that this whole thing got sideways. Is I think that there are indicators that there was a program being run that had to do with UAPs. Now, how far down the rabbit hole that program goes, I don't know. I'm probably the only former DoD guy that can honestly that says I had nothing to do with UAPs, nothing at all. I'm not that guy out there, talking about my involvement. No, I was not that guy at all. But
and I believe you because you've been saying that since the beginning. So
yeah,
I don't think that you had any knowledge
no,
of any of those programs.
No, I don't. But what I think happens is Mr. Grouch possibly got wind of a program that was not undergoing proper congressional oversight, and so using the Intelligence Community Office of the Inspector General, the OIG, he was a whistleblower. Said, I wish to report something for fraud, waste, and abuse. Inside of every SAPF, Special Access Program facility, there's a big poster right next to the door that says, if you suspect fraud, waste, and abuse with this program, call this number and an agent will return your call. And it will be an agent that's read into the program that you're concerned about. So I think, the way he went about that is it seems legitimate to me. It seems like if I was somebody that got wind of a program being run outside of U.S. code without proper congressional oversight, that's how I would blow the whistle on it. Use the intelligence community against itself. So that
yeah, and that's not the problem that I have with the whole situation. The problem that I have with the situation is him claiming all the other things that he's claiming. Right? He's claiming that the government has crash retrieval extraterrestrial craft and that bodies come along with that, but yet he's presenting zero proof, zero evidence for any of that stuff. I would not have one problem in the world with his testimony if that's all he went up there and talked about was this special access program. That would be like you coming forward, Trey, when you came forward a couple of years ago about the Meadow Project, and you just started making outlandish claims with no supporting evidence to any of the things to back up what you're saying, right? You would look like a wackadoo if you came out and you were talking about, seeing UAP out in the Meadow and the black cube in the portal and the people going through the portal. If you didn't have the evidence to back up those statements, which I do believe that you do because I've seen it and it's very interesting. I can't tell you what it is. I don't even think you can tell me what it is, even though you've experienced it and you have it on video, right? The problem is that he's making all of these claims with zero evidence, zero proof. And when he's asked about the evidence and the proof and to reveal the names, and the DOD cleared him to speak about whatever he wanted to speak about.
Right. And there is it's very important to listen to what he's not saying. And like I said, these are layers upon layers and machinations and Byzantine gyration. Is all he said is he heard about a program that involved the retrieval of craft or pieces of craft and biological material. Odds are he probably was never read into that program. So he doesn't have any concrete information. He just maybe heard it in passing. So he doesn't have any.
He claims that. He says that he got this, right. All the information in his testimony is based upon stories right. that he's heard other people tell him. But why would you go up there in front of Congress and just say a bunch of stories? That means that you could literally be anyone. That person, right. You could be it could be someone off of the street that heard this stuff off of the internet and right. goes up to Congress and says that we got extraterrestrial craft with a bunch of bodies that we've recovered.
But he wasn't saying that, I think, in an effort of disclosure. He was saying that to piss Congress off, to make Congress angry that somebody was running programs they had no oversight over, and get them to do the investigating. And the person that cleared him to speak to Congress, in my opinion, this is a guess, probably wasn't read into the program themselves. It's like if I was going, and I had to do this before I wrote my book, is I had to go to a release authority and say, hey, I'm writing a book on, the Meadow Project. It has nothing to do with my work here. It's 100% extracurricular. And this authority said, yeah, no problem. So if he goes forward and he said, hey, I'm going to be talking about craft and biological material and all this wacky stuff, the release authority probably says, yeah, you're a nut job. Yeah, go ahead and talk about it. That's all a bunch of boulder dads. And the release authority themselves might not have been read into the program, so they don't have any authority or knowledge to put the brakes on it. It's all very crafty, in my opinion. It's, what he seems to be doing, and I could be off base here, but just looking at it and the timeline of his activities, he's using the system against itself to force disclosure. But
that's another problem, though, Trey, is that even if this the special access program above congressional oversight gets revealed, does that prove the existence of all the rest of his claims? Would that special access program prove the existence of extraterrestrial craft? And it's another interesting thing. Right. He's the only one in this lineup of people that are testifying. Ryan Graves is there, General mm-hmm. Fravor or Captain Fravor, and they don't say that it's extraterrestrials. Extraterrestrials or ETs never once came out of their mouth. The only person that's claiming that these craft retrievals and these craft that these people are seeing is extraterrestrial is Grush.
Right.
Which I think was a strategic move on Ryan Graves' end and Fravor's end by not, denoting the origin. Let me back up here. I don't think that he actually said extraterrestrial because he said that he didn't want to denote origin, but non-human.
Yeah, non-human, or he said, I think maybe non-terrestrial. I'm trying to remember the terminology. But, so, here's my question, is you always have to wonder why. What's he getting out of this? He's had the fact that he had some psychological issues that apparently was reported to his security manager, and he worked through and had his clearance reinstated. He set himself up for ridicule. Why? Either he's a nut, he's a liar, or he's a patriot. So which one of those, do people want him to be? I don't know. I have to kind of take a look at the way he's going about doing this stuff, apply it to my knowledge base and say, if I was going to disclose or force disclosure, how would I go about do that while protecting myself? I would get that top cover as a whistleblower, and then I would make sure that I was publicly disclosing things that I had no direct knowledge of to give me some plausible deniability. Oh, well, I'm not disclosing that program. I was never read into it. Show me the non-disclosure statement on that program that I signed. You're not going to fight it because I'm not read into it. So on certain levels, it passes the sniff test. Now, the big, in the sanctum sanctorum, the holy of holies, when you open up the door and there's an intergalactic Cadillac sitting in there with, I can't remember the Martian from the Flintstones, but waving at you. Is that behind the sealed door? I don't know, but it's very interesting the way that this seasoned intelligence professional, this veteran of the intelligence community, is going about doing this. Now, I can't speak to the veracity of anything that he said. I do know how the system works, or parts of the system work, and it seems like he's going through it in a very methodical and thought out way. So I guess time will tell. Certainly has people talking.
Yeah, I don't think that it's so much that he was a mental patient and he was, taken against his will to a mental hospital. It's not so much that, it's that he didn't disclose that information. That information had to come out through a FOIA request to the sheriff's department, right? He didn't disclose that to Congress or anybody up front. And I think that that's really what has screwed him on this whole thing. It's not disclosing it up front. And then when people figure out that you're a mental patient that was locked up in a psych ward later on, after you've made this testimony, then it kind of turns the tables just a little bit.
I disagree. And I'll tell you what, because I was a DoD security manager, I dealt with that kind of stuff. And here's how that works: is there are 13 factors. And if anybody has really bored, you can go look up DoD 5200.1R. That's the DoD regulation that talks about personnel security, the vetting of people to give them access to classified information. There are 13 factors that are considered PDI, or potentially derogatory information. Mental health is one of them. Now, the operative word in potentially derogatory information is the P, potentially derogatory information. I would have a person with a clearance come to me or come to one of my subordinates as they're servicing PERSEC, personnel security specialist, and say, I have a problem. The last 2 weeks, I was committed to a mental hospital. Cool. Glad you disclosed that. You're required by law to disclose these things. I am going to suspend your clearance. Okay. I'm going to suspend your access to classified information. That is now sent up to an organization. It used to be called DIS, but now it's the, what did they change that? I can't remember what they changed the name to it. The Center for Background Information. They just changed it when I was getting out. But they will take that information and they will say, okay, Trey and your staff, any information that he has from his physicians, send that to us. We will adjudicate it. The adjudicators that make these decisions for someone to keep or not keep their clearance, long term, is done at a level much higher than me. They are completely unbiased. They don't even know these people. So we would take his medical records. We would take his the statement from his psychiatrist saying, he had dissociative disorder. He's on medication. We're comfortable that he no longer poses a threat to national security. He's lucid. And then we would send that information up to the adjudicator. For every disqualifying factor, there's a series of adjudicative or mitigating standards. Did the person receive treatment? Have they been taking their medication? Have they had any other outbreaks? And if they can mitigate these factors, then they will send down a final determination, give Mr. Smith back access to classified information, make sure he understands if anything else comes about, he needs to report that through the proper channel to his security manager, and rock on. They're not in the business of destroying people's careers. They're in the business of protecting national security. Now, in his defense, what he might have said is, I had a hard time.
Dr. Hugh asked if you can get a little closer to the mic. I guess they're having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, I should be coming through my earbuds, but maybe this is a little bit better. And so, once that's adjudicated, in his mind, maybe that was, everything was, good to go. Everything was fine.
Yeah, it's not even so much. Again, I don't, from my personal standpoint, like I'm not involved with any of this stuff, but just by reading the document that was received by the FOIA request, that
right.
he was hospitalized twice, once in 2014 and once in 2018 due to suicidal tendencies and substance abuse problems.
Right.
It's not that he retained his clearance because things happen. Like people have a rough time and a hard time a lot, right? People have depression episodes all the time, and can be considered mental health cases. It's not that he retained his security clearance. Again, it's that he wasn't upfront about it to the Congress and to the people he's classified as a whistleblower. He's made the right classification and filled out the right paperwork to be covered under the Whistleblower Act, right? So when you're a whistleblower that's supposed to be revealing extraterrestrials or these SAP programs that are running over congressional oversight, then you would want to disclose anything that would be harmfully potential to you in your career going forward.
I guarantee that the OIG investigator that received the whistleblower complaint and the congressional investigators that did the effort to vet this guy knew about that. That's in his security file. So I think the people that needed to know that knew it. And it's one of those things. Do you want your dirty laundry put out to the public? No, of course not. We're human beings, But I tend to have a little bit different. As a security manager with a degree in psychology, I tend not to look at that as too much of a stigma if a person has been treated and is owning their disorder. I also served in Afghanistan. Okay, that does something to a person. And so I'm not going to get too excited about that particular thing because the people that needed to know that illness, his treatment and subsequent cure, knew about it. And they thought he was credible enough of a witness to come forward to this hearing. You just don't walk up to the hearing, knock on the door and say, hey, I'd like to come in and say something. These people are vetted. So once again, taking the totality, it's kind of a gestalt. You're looking at the sum of the parts instead of the individual parts themselves. Does that make him a credible witness? Talking to the people that served it with him, in the Air Force, also served with him in the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, worked with him in Afghanistan, all say that he was a very, very astute, professional member of the intelligence community. So why would this dude go off the rails, especially with something that's such a lightning rod topic as extraterrestrial biological material and pieces and parts of potential craft? I just have to ask myself, and I put on my analyst hat and say, okay, why? What's the reason? What's the outcome? What's the motivation? And there are kooks out there that do it just for you deal with them a whole lot more than I do. That just do it because they want to hear themselves. I was a double X commander on Zeta Reticuli of the Secret Space Force. President Reagan's not dead. And he's up there with Ham the chimpanzee from the Mercury days.
Yep, and I met Barack Obama on the moon, and we had a top secret mission, and then I was age regressed back 20 years to the very point that I was taken. Didn't even know about it until now.
I was kidnapped, in New York and taken to a 8-level subterranean base, under the Montauk, peninsula. Never mind the fact that the water table on that peninsula is a whole lot higher than 8 levels underground. So, it's so what's his reason for this?
But this is the problem, though. He almost looks like those kinds of people, though, whenever he says these kinds of things and doesn't have any evidence or proof to back it up.
Right.
He's almost in the exact same camp as these secret space program super soldier whistleblowers, right? That are experts on UFO. Apparently, this is the only community that you can all of a sudden just be an expert on with absolutely no credentials, right? I can just say that I'm a expert on UFOs, and then all of a sudden
Right.
I'm an expert on UFOs, just like the secret space program and the super soldier whistleblowers self-proclaimed that they were whistleblowing about advanced technology when a lot of it's made up bullcrap nonsense, right? Really quick, Hound Dog, thanks so much for the $10 super sticker, brother. Appreciate you a lot for your kindness and generosity and support of the show, brother. Thanks so much. But that's almost what he seems like, right? He's almost he's teetering on that camp of wackadoo nonsense and non-wackadoo nonsense.
Well, I think he's like, old Mrs. Peters that lives in the neighborhood, and she sits on the end of the street with her binoculars. And she calls the cops and says, I don't know if there's drug dealing going on at the house down the street, but this is what I saw. You might want to look into it. I think he's Mrs. Peters. I think he saw something that might be kind of stinky and says, hey, Office of the Inspector General, Congress, you might want to look into this. I wasn't read into that program, so I don't have any direct official knowledge. But this is what I heard. And it makes me think that maybe it doesn't have proper oversight. So I think he's getting Congress and the ICOIG to do his dirty work for him, to do his legwork for him, while providing him with a degree of plausible deniability and top cover.
But does that brings into the whole question of what a whistleblower actually is, and you would know this better than I would because you were not a whistleblower or anything, but you work for the DoD and you've worked for Army intelligence, and you would know what a whistleblower is. Right. And to me, a whistleblower, just me personally, has to have some sort of evidence to be classified as a whistleblower. Can you be a whistleblower by just having testimonial classified? Because that's what he says in the congressional hearing, is that he heard this from classified testimony. Right.
Yeah, I think so. And like I said, because we would have, the whistleblower hotline to the intelligence community, OIG, in these facilities, and what they're focusing on is fraud, waste, and abuse. Okay. If you're defrauding the government, if you're wasting money, or if you're abusing the program, the way the programs are set up, you can call this number to the OIG. And then, of course, there's another side of it that you call directly to counterintelligence if you think this information is being improperly or illegally disclosed. So, he catches wind of a potential program that's being operated without proper congressional oversight. He calls the OIG and he says, hey, I heard about a program, even though I'm not read into it, that might be run outside of proper protections and criteria for a waived SAP. You might want to look into it. Now that he's disclosed that, and he's disclosed that he was on the periphery of this information, he's given certain legal protections against reprisal, demotion, things like that. And, I just think it's kind of odd that he comes out with this as a whistleblower. Now they were really quick to release some of his medical information. I know when I would handle that kind of information for people, it was inviolate. I couldn't discuss that with their neighbor. I couldn't discuss that with their coworkers. I could discuss it with their direct supervisor, my staff, and the commander, and also the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, the Central Adjudication Facility, the CAF, that actually does the adjudication of this, and that's all. So, is it an effort to discredit them? I don't know. I just find the timing odd.
Well, I don't know how much discrediting you would really need to do if he had proof and evidence for his claims.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, he wouldn't. He never said he was read into the program. What's going to be interesting is getting somebody that was read into the program, that is willing to violate their non-disclosure agreement and say, yes, I was there. And I'll give you an example. Let's say I worked on a program that was working on, and folks, I'm not saying I was, I'm using this as an example, but let's say non-traditional propulsion methods that were not air breathing like a jet, were not inertia, like a satellite. They were novel propulsion technologies. Now, if I said I worked on that program, how am I going to prove it? Unless it's ever declassified and they say, okay, here's a list of all the personnel that worked on this program, and there's my name. I mean, some of the stuff that I worked with years ago, early, when the Army, I can't prove I worked with it. I mean, you can see that I was actually a branch qualified Army intelligence officer who usually, worked with certain stuff, but I have no proof of it because some of this stuff is still classified. So until, whoever is the program security officer for this program, if it does exist, this extraterrestrial program, if and when he or she ever decides that it needs to be de-established and goes to the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, I think it's Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, I think, is the one that does that. I'd have to go back and read the regs. And convinces them to decertify and decertify and de-establish the SAP program and then declassify it all the way up to the public release level, we're never going to have evidence. I mean, do we have evidence that stealth aircraft are actually stealthy?
Well, I guess you would I guess you could prove it in the form of if it actually happened or if it was ever, reported on, or if people seen it in the public, right? You would be able to use that as evidence. Let's say that a special access program that, was ran within the government that was used to take away the potency of a crime lord or a drug gang or a cartel's potency of their hoppy plants, right? And that started a global. Then you would see the evidence of it because it actually happened.
And I'll give you something that I actually, on a periphery of something, is I don't know if anybody's ever read the book Killing Pablo, or Killing Pablo Escobar. Is excellent book. Kind of gives a peek on how specialized intelligence and special operations, especially with Special Operations Forces Detachment Delta Force operates back then. And I know a dude that was a Delta Force guy. And he said, and there is some corroboration of this, that the people that pulled the trigger on Pablo Escobar were actually Delta Force operators. Okay. Actually, they were the guys that were supporting the Colombian military, what they called the search block, and that you had a U.S. Army asset through the intelligence support activity that was doing signals intelligence, collecting cell phone data tied to Pablo Escobar. And it was actually Delta dudes, operators, that pulled the trigger. And I've heard that from several corroborating sources in that world. Now, can I prove that? No, I can't prove that. Even if one of the dudes came forward and said, yep, I was the dude that pulled the trigger on Pablo Escobar, they're never going to declassify that operation, because what it does is it would compromise methodologies and operational methodologies that they use on these kind of operations, and it might also compromise the way some intelligence was collected to make that intelligence actionable. So, here's the thing: is what does it take to prove that the moon landing was real? I don't know. I heard it's real. I was a young child watching the LIM land on the moon, but I don't know.
We've also been told several times through the community that it was fake as well. It's confusion. It's just a huge thing of confusion.
Right. And so, some people, are not going to believe that, aliens, and I hate that term. I'm just going to call them others, because we don't even know if they're extraterrestrial. They might be interdimensional. Unless one comes up and bites you on the butt, what's it going to take? I know ghosts are real. I've encountered them. But until you've encountered one yourself, how do you know? What does it take to convince you? It's like when people say some of the stuff that you said on your own research is a bunch of boulder dash. Well, I mean, I've got a stack of affidavits. I've got film of different events. Believe it or not.
The thing that really gets me, Trey, is that normally when people are talking about something real, like if they're talking about, if they have some sort of classified information, right? If they have some sort of classified document, or they're aware of a special access program or something that's top secret within the military or within the government, they suffer some sort of repercussions for doing that. They get prosecuted, right? Dr. David Morehouse from the Stargate Project, he wrote that book, Psychic Warrior, before the program was declassified, and he got into a lot of trouble. He was prosecuted, right?
Right.
So that should be a red flag to see if people are actually have real classified information or not. Depends on if they are actually getting into trouble legally for revealing classified information.
Well, see, that's where it gets a little weird, is if you are not read into that program, if you're not read into Rampant Orange, and you hear people talking about Rampant Orange, and you release the information on that, I can't come after you. You've not signed a non-disclosure agreement. You have not violated law. It's only the people that have signed the non-disclosure statements that they can go after. Now, you can't get in trouble if the information is released and you're approached by the appropriate governmental entity and say the information you have is classified, and then there's something called an inadvertent disclosure agreement, and that's something that and I've had to deal with these before. Somebody figures something out, and they release that information. The non-authorized person is myself, and some agents would go to them and say, "Oops, you figured out that Rampant Orange is a hypersonic missile program. You're not supposed to know that. We need you to sign here saying that you will never talk about it again." And everybody goes home happy. But in doing that, in approaching an individual with this inadvertent disclosure statement, is I'm actually saying, yes, there really is something to this, and you know about it. Another tack is to not even mention it, is to not say anything about it, not draw attention to it. And there are ways to, I'm not going to call them disinformation programs, but they are ways to take disclosures of information from these special access programs and divert it. Well, you didn't really see a hypersonic missile test. It was, a B-52 contract, or those trucks you saw, that had the Yagi antenna on top of it. That wasn't really a classified military electronic intelligence truck. That was a bunch of ham radio operators.
That's what the media does all the time.
They do.
Classic tactic.
Yeah. So, and they do it to protect national security. I don't think all of these efforts to protect this information is necessarily malicious. I think you have just a bunch of guys and gals trying to do their best to keep the lid on certain things.
Hondo brings up a good point in saying that it's so obvious that our government would waste tax dollars listening to secondhand testimony. I mean, and he's right. I mean, that's a really good point, Hondo.
Right.
Why would they waste money listening to someone that got all of his information from other people that were telling him stories? Unless you're correct in saying that, because of those people, if you're right in saying what you're saying, Trey, then those people that actually were a part of these kinds of programs are never going to come forward.
Right, and that's where it gets interesting. And if you listen to him saying, he said there are certain things that I will say that I am not going to say in an unclassified format or arena. So we don't know what he's told Congress behind closed doors, inside of their own SAP app or SCIP, and we don't know who's corroborated his testimony and his allegations on the high side, on the classified side. So we don't know what's going on behind the curtain. It could be there's 50 guys and gals out there that are saying, yes, I will corroborate everything you said. But in our corroboration, we're disclosing classified information, so that can't be made public, that corroboration even exists. It's frustrating, isn't it?
Well, from a lot of the congressmen and women that were part of that congressional hearing, a lot of them were denied from the skiff, and the people that were a part of the skiff, and this is documented. This is from statements from them saying that he basically had nothing, and that what he told them in the skiff was basically nothing. He didn't reveal anything more in the skiff that he revealed in the congressional testimony.
Yeah, I haven't read that.
He actually revealed more in that News Nation interview that was not in front of Congress than he did in the congressional testimony. And like, why would he not at least talk about the things that he previously talked about in a News Nation interview in Australia in the congressional testimony? See, there's so many things that really aren't adding up, and it might be similar to like what you're saying, but from an outsider perspective, he looks like he has nothing.
Nothing.
He has no evidence. It's a huge nothing burger.
Yeah, and only time will tell. Where this goes. If it generates, some inertia in Congress to dig into this, and who knows when Congress pulls back the layer of the onion, they look down and they say, "Whoa, we can't ever disclose this stuff." And we're no better off than we were, last year. So it's a very, very interesting time to be alive as far as disclosure on this stuff, but it's also equally as frustrating.
Firefly says that he got paid for the News Nation interview. I'm not sure about that. He might have, but I do know that he had a documentary lined up before he ever testified in front of Congress, before he even became a whistleblower, which is another thing that's really suspect about this. The money aspect of this and being in the spotlight and having this information that's just, I mean, I've interviewed several people, Trey. I've interviewed a lot of people on my show. Can I take all of those testimonies and take them to Congress and tell them about what I know from all the people that I've talked to as well, and it be taken seriously? It's kind of like it's a weird thing.
Yeah,
really weird thing.
It is, and I guess it basically what it comes down to is, what do you personally believe? And even more important, what do you want to believe? Like the poster over my shoulder here from the X-Files. I want to believe. What's your belief system? And I like to think that maybe it was an honest effort at forcing disclosure. The way he's gone about it makes sense to me. From my professional background, the way he's using the OIG to do the legwork, doing a whistleblower for top cover so he can't be prosecuted or retaliated against. And I guess we'll just have to see how it shakes out. I've been talking, believe it or not, I've gotten other queries and phone calls from people. You and I discussed an individual, well known in the UAP arena that was saying, how does this work? How do these special access programs work? How does this system protect itself? And what do you think this means? And it passes the sniff test. If I was going to disclose something like this that I caught wind of, that's the way I would go about it. Now, or it could be a bunch of bullshit. I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and find out.
Joshua made a good point here. Assange and Snowden were legit. Grush, not so much.
Yeah.
And that's another example of two whistleblowers that had classified information.
Yeah, and the difference on that, especially in Snowden, is he was actually read into this SCI, the Special Department program, and had access to something called JWIX, which is a top secret SCI computer system. And he downloaded all the data, like on Echelon and all of that stuff. He downloaded it and took it with him. I'm trying to remember. I think he forwarded it to Assange, and I can't remember how all that worked out. But he actually had, the smoking gun, in his hand, and was able to pass it on to somebody else. Grouch never said he had the smoking gun. He never said he saw the smoking gun. He said he smelled some of the gunpowder, but he's never actually seen it.
Yeah, which those two cases are very interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I kind of had I honestly liked Fravor and Ryan Graves' testimony during that
Yeah,
whole thing much better than I liked
yeah,
Grush's testimony. Right?
right.
Because they actually seen something. Now, whether what they seen was an actual extraterrestrial craft or not, because there was a lot of interesting comments between the congressmen that were, they were constantly asking them, is this our craft? Right? Is
Yes,
this some reverse engineered? Is this our military?
that,
And but it was
that's a great.
interesting the way that it was set up. It had Grush, which had all these stories just right in the center, and they used Ryan Graves to sort of legitimize Grush, and then Fravor after Grush. So they
Mhm.
sandwiched him right in the middle of these two military
Yeah, credible.
officers, credible people. I mean,
Yeah,
regardless of what they believe, I believe that they
right,
saw something. Regardless if it was an extraterrestrial craft or not, I don't personally believe that it was an extraterrestrial craft, but that's neither here nor there, right? What they saw is what they said,
right,
and they didn't make any hyperbole or conjecture around really what they
right.
saw. They basically said, they were like, hey, uh, you know, we aren't aware of any craft that can maneuver like this at the speeds, which I think is a lie. I think we've had that craft for a really long time. Now, whether regardless if they know about it or not
Right.
is, a difference. But, they haven't differed from their story, and they're not just going up there and talking about a bunch of different stories that they heard from other people talk about, right?
Yeah, and
Which,
that's interesting because I think you hit on something that's a personal belief of mine. Is I think a lot of things that are being seen and reported are undisclosed airframes being operated by DARPA and some other agents, which is
yes.
that's what they do. That's their job is develop these whiz bang. I don't know if you're familiar with Tacit Blue, which was the precursor to the stealth technology. Some of the aircraft they were flying under Tacit Blue were insane looking, crazy things, which make no sense. But they were valid, airframes. Uh, the F-117 was an operational airframe, actual flying missions back in the 70s, but it was done under the cover out of Tampana for another unit. So it was all done under a special access program. So yeah, I think a lot of that is unacknowledged airframes. I think some of the stuff, with the five observables, when you start stacking them on top of each other, yeah, then it starts to get a little weird. And I think some of the stuff out there is other, uh, and that's kind of half the fun of this is trying to determine what everything is, and always wondering. It would be an awfully boring world if we had all the answers.
Yeah, that's what I try and explain to people too. What would we do if we automatically knew everything all the
Right.
time and we had all the information? That takes the fun out of all this stuff and talking about it, right? We wouldn't be talking right now on this show, being live in front of on all these different platforms if we absolutely knew without a shadow of a doubt. No one would be listening either.
Right. Yeah. It would be
Yeah,
it would be awfully boring.
yeah, and yeah. I just think they should have went about it in a different way. And if he was cleared by the DoD to go out there and talk about everything that he knew about extraterrestrials and crash retrievals and non-biologicals that come along with these crash retrievals, then he should have done that. What better opportunity are you ever going to have to come forward with that kind of information than in front of Congress? Right?
Yeah.
And he's probably never going to get it again. The congressional congressmen are saying that it was such an embarrassment that they're never going to do it again, at least publicly.
Yeah.
So
Well,
they blew it. They blew it. He blew it. All of them, they blew it. They had a great opportunity right then and there to talk about the names of the people, the people that he got the information from, the names of the special access programs that are running above congressional oversight,
right.
and he didn't do it. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. I
Yeah. I
think that
mean,
it really put a nail in the coffin on this topic for years to come. They probably won't do this again for a really long time, and he
and
missed
it
the
could have been
opportunity.
Well, it could have been one of those things. I know something I can tell you, but I can't tell you. So I'm not going to tell you. So by me not telling you, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And so, will we ever get the complete truth? No, of course not. But maybe we can start getting some indicators, and a brave soul that will come forth and say, hey, I was on the retrieval operation. We launched out of X Air Base in a C-17 into Brazil, blah blah blah, and then somebody's going to go, well, that guy's lying. Where's the proof? Like I knew one of the crew chiefs that was on an MC-130 that flew into the Iranian desert on Operation, I think it was Operation Eagle Claw, to retrieve the Iranian hostages. You remember when that whole operation went south? He has no way of proving that he was on that operation, except that he was in a unit that did that kind of stuff, and I believe him. So, what's proof?
Yeah, I guess it comes down to your definition of, proof and your definition of evidence. And his proof and evidence does not add up in my book. But what I want to do really quick is talk about some official, non-official special access programs that you may or may not have ever been involved with. And could you give an example of one of those? Because again, I think it's important to nail home the fact that this theory that's been going around the community for years and years and years and years, that when people hear in the community a special access program, that all of them involve reverse engineering of extraterrestrial craft or some kind of anti-gravity or free energy devices or something like that. So could you maybe describe a potential special access program that you may or may not know of?
No. Just no. But I will tell you this: there are all kinds of special programs being run, and there's three flavors of them. There's acquisition, operation, and intelligence. Those are the three types of special access programs. Intelligence is what you think it is: collecting intelligence, using technology to collect intelligence. Acquisition is how do we build our widgets? How do we make our widgets faster and stealthier, and be able to withstand buttloads of damage from our adversaries? And then operational is how do we plan to go in there and pop a cap on Osama bin Laden? How do we coordinate with the 160th Special Operations Air Regiment? How do we coordinate with SEAL Team 6? Where does SFOD Delta fall into this mix? So that's an operational set. And you will have people working literally next to you that are read into a program that you have no knowledge about. Not saying that I've ever had people come up years later and say, oh my goodness, I didn't know that you were even involved in that. I was involved with it for years and your name never came up. But that doesn't mean you don't necessarily tell people what you know and you don't know. And the person working next to you might be in the same program, but doing a different aspect of it.
Right, the compartmentalization of it.
Yeah. It's compartmentalization. Yes, absolutely. Nobody has the full picture except up at the program security office level and higher.
King James makes a good point here. Grush has yet to disclose anything that hasn't already been openly available for decades.
Right.
Yeah, you're right, King James. You hit the nail on the head there. He hasn't said anything that the community hasn't already talked about or known about or theorized about or think that was actually happening.
Right.
And even with the special access programs above congressional oversight that he talks about that are being funded from overcharging of other special access programs, Catherine Austin Fitz has been talking about that forever, and she was the secretary of the Bush administration.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're going to have to see. The proof, the smoking gun, is going to be as Congress investigates this, with their mechanism, the Government Accounting Office does their investigation. What comes out of it? That might not be anytime soon, if ever. So, we'll just see if that, that little nudge has gotten the ball rolling. And, there might be another soul that comes forward and says, yes, this is in fact something going on and it needs to be investigated and disclosed.
It's also interesting too in that congressional testimony as well. He was talking about the repercussions of him being a whistleblower, and it turned out that that was the mental health case and him being taken to a mental health facility for suicidal tendencies and substance abuse problems, but what he blamed on the government trying to discredit him, which he tried to get out ahead of the curve on that one. But if you were trying to get out ahead of the curve, then you would just put that up front, right? I don't know. I would have just, if I was in his shoes and I was, and I had this information or whatever, I would just, and I had some problems, I would just get out ahead of it and be like, hey, listen, this is what happened. So then you don't have anything for people to come out and be like, yo, you're not credible, right? But him doing it like that, it makes him look very uncredible.
Now, one thing that was kind of squirrely for me when he kind of went all Jason Bourne saying, oh, my life has, been put at risk and my family's life has been put at risk. Really, I mean, it sounds like a cheap spy novel. They're not going to off you. What they're going to do is just never talk about it. They're going to move you out of these areas, out of these programs. You're going to sit down in front of a counterintelligence agent from your whatever agency, and an FBI agent, and they're going to say, if you talk about this, you're going to end up like Robert Hansen and spending the rest of your life in a supermax facility in Florence, Colorado, seeing sunlight for 1 hour a day the rest of your life. So shut up, shut the F up. And I don't know about most people, but that would be enough of a life-changing event for me. And I would go about my quiet little life and never talk about it again. So, the whole, ninja snipers, trying to take, that just seems kind of silly to me. It is melodramatic as hell. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's over the top. It's mystical, and for some reason within this community really solidifies what you're saying. If the government is after you and they're doing things to discredit you, it really just solidifies your testimony even more.
Yeah, like I said, when we slid the inadvertent disclosure statement in front of that individual, explained you saw A, B, and C. You never need to talk about it again. We know that you know, and now you know that we know. Sign that you're never going to talk about it again. And that individual came to me later and he says, I never want to meet those people ever again in my life. Don't worry about me ever saying a word. I will take it to my grave. It's that much of a life-changing event. And I don't think there's any reason to go all, special operations, assassination squads. That just seems silly to me.
What do you think about the Men in Black? Because I think this is really where a lot of this started, with these government operatives and people claiming to be visited by the Men in Black when they would see something weird. What's your thoughts on the Men in Black?
I think that's two things. Two things are going on. One is people are, especially during the Cold War, and anybody that lived during the Cold War or worked for the government or the military during the Cold War, it was a very tense time, extremely tense. We were continuously teetering on the edge of a full-scale confrontation with the Soviet Union. So things were taken very seriously back then. And I think a lot of the Men in Black reports were military or other agency counterintelligence agents coming to somebody and saying, you saw something. And I'll give you an example. This is my guess on it, is Kecksburg. Okay.
That's a good one.
What I think that was is, I believe that was a film recovery pod from a Corona satellite, which was a spy satellite that used films, and it dropped an acorn-shaped cone that was retrieved by aircraft. I think, I'm just guessing, but to me it seems like that was a premature ejection of that film pod that landed in Kecksburg There's something called an NDA or National Defense Area that you can have a security specialist or military officer come in and say, this area is now a national defense area. We are taking it over. Nobody can leave or come in. Anybody that's inside of this area, when I establish it, will be debriefed. It's called an NDA, National Defense Area. So I think that's what happened with that. Now this whole mythology, evolved around that. And then the Men in Black, like, I think they saw a national defense, national security item that was highly sensitive, and they were warned in the interest of national security, we need you to be a patriot, and I talked about this. But if you don't want to be a patriot, we'll put you in prison and make you regret that you ever lived. And so I think that's one half of it. Now the other half of it is, I think there are men in black, which are apparitions, and the way people interpret those, could be humanoids, wearing dark suits. It could be, you get into the whole John Keel thing about how our perceptions guide what we see and how we interpret it. So I think there's actually two phenomena going on. One is the terrestrial, explainable, ordinary, and the other one is perhaps people encountering things that are not within their wheelhouse, or something not within their frame of reference.
Yeah, and it almost seems like a operation, right? Because that's what you would do in a operation, right? If someone's seen something, you would go out there and ask them to see what they saw.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, you would debrief them. You would sit them down. You would isolate them from other people that saw it. What did you see? You would look at their statement and say, okay, did they see enough that's dangerous? Did they see information that would either be damage to national security, serious damage, or extremely grave damage? And if the answer to that is no, no, and no, then they can go on and talk about whatever. If they do cross that threshold, then you need to go and you need to administer the inadvertent disclosure statement and say, you saw something, you don't need to talk about it. You're signing this document, which basically is a legally binding non-disclosure agreement. And if you talk about it, then we'll prosecute you. And the listener mentioned Assange and Snowden. That's an example of that. Assange, he just received the information. That information was so sensitive that I received a notice to put it out to people under my, that I was responsible for, is if they went to the WikiLeaks site on a government computer, I would come and I would seize that computer, because that computer now has classified information on it, and we would wipe the hard drive, and then you would sign a inadvertent disclosure agreement. That's how sensitive the information that was put out there on WikiLeaks was.
Wow! And you were in charge of that?
Well, my office and our information technology people. Yeah, no, it came down from our headquarters that if you access that from a government computer, we would take your computer. And we've done it plenty of times as people would stumble across something. We would take their computers called spillage, and we would wipe their computer. Now, what people do at home, that's not a government system. We don't have spies watching what you do at home. But the WikiLeaks thing was so sensitive that we were warned you could not access that site from a government computer. Kind of an old war story is back when I was at the Army Intel School, the Tom Clancy book, The Cardinal of the Kremlin, had just come out. And there was some very sensitive stuff in that book that Tom Clancy figured out. In a SCIF, Special Compartment Information Facility, there's a guy called a Special Security Officer, which is kind of the same thing as a SAP Security Officer. And he told us, he said, do not bring a copy of Cardinal of the Kremlin into my office and say, but they're talking about such and such and such and such, because I will confiscate your book and I will shred it. So just don't even bring it to me.
Well, I think that the government just got rid of. They said they made a law, or they banned TikTok from all government devices.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and there is a very good reason TikTok was banned from government devices. I do not have TikTok on my private device. I do not trust TikTok. And anybody listening out there, that's not bullshit. Anything that you put on TikTok, any device that has TikTok on it, every bit of information on that device goes to the Chinese Communist Party, the Chi-Com intelligence apparatus.
verifiable?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not an accident that we just kind of said, well, we hate TikTok because it sounds silly. No, there's a reason TikTok is banned from certain technologies. There's a reason for it.
Joshua brought up a question here. Writer Trey, any comment on the Capitol Hill UFO incident around 1952? I think he's referring to the Washington Flap incident,
Right.
1952,
Right.
or the Battle of LA. You go first, and then I'll follow you.
I'm not that old, guys. I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old. No, that was really interesting because both those incidents were witnessed by multiple people, and it was right in the middle of the Cold War. Like I kind of alluded to earlier. So the interesting thing is all of the the visual accounts, any military accounts of it, records of energetic engagements, i.e., radar, stuff like that. All of that's been buried inside of the Pentagon somewhere. So, was it a Russian invasion, a Soviet invasion? Was it, UAPs, UFOs? Was it, our guys, getting picked up, that were doing a test or something? I really don't know. I would love to get to the bottom of that because the Battle of LA, I mean, that's just something that I just think is so cool, especially, with the fact that you have, pieces of anti-aircraft artillery exploding in the air and raining down on cars inside of Los Angeles. That's some pretty serious stuff. And I would love to know what's going on with that. And the same thing with the UFO incident over the Capitol. Fascinating stuff. And it might be one of those things that's been buried so deep we'll never know the truth.
Yeah, I find it interesting, the Washington Flap event, because who was president during 1952? Was it Ford? Eisenhower?
52, yeah, I think so. Eisenhower.
Huh. Well, anyway, whoever was president, I would have to look it up again, but whoever was president during 1952, it might have been Eisenhower, or might have won earlier that year, but they gave a shoot down order for the UFOs over the White House during the Washington Flap event. Right. So if these were extraterrestrial craft, why in the world would they risk war with an interplanetary space fleet when they just got out of World War II? That's not going to happen. So that, to me, means that it was our craft, somebody else, some other, maybe a breakaway civilization like Dr. Joseph Farrell talks about, that was coming to show what they got to us and flex their muscles over the White House because they gave a shoot down order. You're not going to give a shoot down order to something that is an extraterrestrial craft. They had to have known that it was some sort of man-made craft from someplace else.
Or everything was on such a hair trigger, and we had distant early warning, the dew line set up, so watch over the horizon, that this was a armada of craft that got in, underneath our detection capabilities, that could be Soviet, that's penetrating, just like we have, shoot down orders over certain areas of the National Capital Region now, that they crossed a certain line, it's unidentified, shoot it down. So I remember.
This is almost the exact same thing with the Battle of LA as well. Mm-hmm. They were shooting at the craft at the Battle of LA, and there's many reports of the bullets bouncing off of something tin can or something metal. That doesn't sound extraterrestrial to me. It sounds human made.
Yeah, perhaps. And you always have the famous photograph of the spotlights, locking in on multiple spotlights locking on the target, as the anti-aircraft are engaging. So who knows?
I think it was Henry Truman. Henry Truman was president during the time of the Washington Flap event, but I think that Eisenhower became president later on that year. I'm pretty sure it was Truman, yeah.
That's right. Harry Truman succeeded Roosevelt when he passed away and then won his own election. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah, because I remember researching the event, but I got so much stuff in my head with a bunch of different dates and people to remember that it's hard to remember all those people. Got to look it up sometimes. But yeah, those are really interesting events. But again, I think that there's a thing that they do after every one of these events. You just mentioned Kecksburg, and I believe that was in '65 in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. When that happened, they came out and said that they did not believe that the event had anything to do with extraterrestrials. They did the exact same thing after the Washington Flap event, Battle of LA, Roswell. So it's like, I feel like they're telling you, but they're just letting the public speculate, and the community has just gotten so out of control that they're willing to believe in anything now.
Right.
I don't know. That's my personal opinion, and I'm open to other people's opinion. But it really seems like that the extraterrestrial narrative and the extraterrestrial hypothesis has been propagated and pushed out there by us, by the community, when the government has been telling us this entire time that it's not extraterrestrials.
Oh, and I think there's, my own personal opinion is I think they are telling the truth. I don't think it's extraterrestrial as we think of extraterrestrial. That there's a planet, of 3 dimensions, and they get in their intergalactic Cadillac and they drive over here and they hop out and, do whatever, have a picnic, and then head back home. I think it's interdimensional. I think that, you start getting down into, micro quantum things, extra dimensional activities and things do take place. I mean, that's a fact. And I think if you extrapolate it up to a macro environment, I think that's reasonable too. But it's perhaps just beyond our understanding that we can't perceive it. So, is it, like I said, is it a unidentified flying object, something that you can grab and put your hands on? Maybe not. Maybe it's more of a phenomenon.
Yeah, Joshua Carter said Eisenhower made a deal with the ETs supposedly after those incidents. Well, if you look up who propagated those thoughts and ideas and theories, it was Bill Cooper. And Bill Cooper got a lot of his information from a fake documentary that came out in 1978 called The Alternative 3. So there's your little study on that. Also, Joshua, you warned about the military-industrial complex. Yeah, he did. He did, and that's what a lot of people they point to, and I think that he did that because he knew that they had created these crafts and they were going to disguise them as extraterrestrial crafts. But that's just my personal thoughts, my personal ideas on the matter. Do you have any comments on Eisenhower talking about the military-industrial complex? Thanks for your questions, by the way, Joshua, and your comments. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, it's strange that you mentioned Agenda 3. Because that's a bit of synchronicity. I was actually reading something about Agenda 3 and the whole Agenda 3 hoax that it was done on 1 April, by the BBC. Duh, it was an April Fool's thing.
Yeah.
And it still, propagates to today, which, it was a hoax. Even if you look at the credits of it, it's like, it's like Monty Python credits. They're silly. So anyway, that's interesting because I was just reading about that. And going back to Eisenhower, I just completely lost my train of thought. Talking about Eisenhower and the military-industrial complex. I think what he was worried about is the ascendancy of military contractors. It used to be back in the days that I'm an Army guy, so I'll talk about Army. The Army had the Army Ordnance Corps. And you had places like Rock Island Arsenal and Waterville Arsenal and all of these arsenals that actually built war material. It was built by the Army. And then they started contracting it out because they couldn't meet the demands for World War II. So they started farming out to, General Motors. I have an M1 carbine made by the Universal Typewriter Company, of all things, in my safe. So they started farming out these war materials to private contractors. And so it got to be a problem that these contractors who are in the business of making money, that's what they do, that can become its own self-licking lollipop. And I know when I was in Afghanistan, you look at the number of military people there and government people versus the number of contractors, it eclipses the military forces we have there. Just the number of people from Kellogg, Brown and Root, KBR, ran our mess hall. It wasn't Army cooks cooking our food. It was KBR. It wasn't Army transportation units bringing stuff in. They were contracted aircraft from all kinds of different places. So, the military-industrial complex and can become like a multi-headed hydra, but you can't cut off the heads fast enough. And I think that's probably kind of where we're at today. Is and I've worked with many defense contractors. A lot of them are very patriotic, good people. But when it just becomes its own self-licking lollipop and its own ends to a means to an end, it can become problematic. And unfortunately, with us sending all the arms over to Ukraine right now, it's easy pickings right now for the defense contractors to start ramping up the need to develop more weapon systems to replenish the ones that we've expended and sent over to Ukraine. So it's it's a real danger. It's a danger in any republic when war becomes a business.
Yeah, and I actually got the date wrong on the Alternative 3 documentary. It's 1977, and the book came out in 78. I said that the documentary came out in 78, but it came out in 77. I just wanted to make sure that that was accurate. But there was a lot of interesting things in the Alternative 3 documentary and the subsequent book that came out. They marketed the Alternative 3 material as real nonfiction material, and they got everyone hooked in, especially in the documentary and the book. A lot of people in the United States didn't see the documentary until way later, which it's pretty dang interesting. And I can see how people could be fooled, right? Because I'm going to be covering this other fake documentary on Saturday with Shane the Ruiner called The Orion Conspiracy. And this Orion Conspiracy thing is a humdinger, dude. It brings in everything. And it seems pretty dang real. If I was listening to this back when it came out in 2008, I would probably buy into it. And I probably did actually listen to it back in 2008. It was very popular on YouTube when YouTube was just free reign. You could put out whatever you wanted to put out on YouTube. But the Alternative 3 material is really interesting because it basically says that a lot of the missing people in the world are being taken by the military and the intelligence community and taken to the moon and taken to Mars to work on like colonies and all that. And then at the end of the documentary, it has a craft that's landing on Mars, and you see this little strange thing that's popping up its hand, and all of the secret space program people and all the super soldier people in the community use this material as being accurate and real, right? And it turns out that was a miniature of Mars, and the thing that was moving up underground was the director's finger. It's unbelievable, and that was taken as real, and all these theories and all these speculations really formed surrounding that. And then you got the Montauk Project that formed up out of that came out of the Philadelphia experiment that was based on a freaking fictional movie that everyone ripped off. Preston Nichols just ripped off the Philadelphia experiment movie that came out, and I believe let me find out when the Philadelphia experiment movie came out. But he just took that movie and then created his own lore and his own, almost word for word, exactly what happened in the Philadelphia experiment fictional movie.
Which was based off of a book by, I believe, Berlitz, which was a retelling of a retelling of a retelling of a degassing operation for the USS Etheridge. It was a common thing in Norfolk they did all the time. So, yeah, stories like this can can gain their own momentum. So, kind of like what we started off talking about is where does the misconception, the lie, and the truth part ways?
Yep, that's exactly right. The Philadelphia experiment fictional movie came out in 1984. So, and then Preston Nichols built his entire theory around the Montauk experiment based on the Philadelphia experiment fictional movie, and then got everyone else bought into it as well. Okay, this is a good question from Joshua here again. Also, any explanation for the rapid advancement in technology in the 50s and 60s, lasers, microwaves, etc., just human ingenuity, or was it given to us? This is an old conspiracy theory that says that the extraterrestrials gave us this technology and that's how we developed it.
Yeah, it's if you go back and you look at some of the technology that was being developed during World War II, and of course in Germany with the Nazis you had the Wunderwaffen, the wonder weapons, And some of those weapon systems were extremely advanced, like television-guided missiles. And there was from what I understand, there was a device very similar to transistors that the Germans had developed to use in some of their miniaturization, especially of radar units that they could put on their aircraft and guide aircraft to do night fighting and things like that. And then there was a big effort to establish early warning radar systems to detect incoming bomber fleets. The British had worked on one, the Germans were working on them. So there was a lot of technology that was being developed. But as this technology matured, it was kept under the veil of secrecy because it was vital military technology. And the various countries did not want to tip their hands on what capabilities they had. Because as soon as you develop a capability, you have to start developing a way to counter that capability. So it was like, capability, counter capability, counter capability, counter capability. And the technology started, exploding exponentially. And I remember before there was the internet, I remember when the first dial-up happened and how that just exploded so fast. The technology expands exponentially, not linearly. So that's why I think, it started in the 60s. And I remember, the space race, space technology, and how it developed so quickly since then.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's the way that it works. It keeps evolving and things get better. And then, we started out with, it went from books to radio to television to phones, and then the communication, the way that it, developed. And it's also interesting that that's exactly the way that the UFOs developed too, right?
Mm-hmm.
They changed.
Yeah.
They changed from the very when people first started seeing them. They turned from disc to cigar-shaped craft to interdimensional craft, and now you got flying humanoid people and all the stuff, and it developed along the exact same lines that our technology developed.
Well, in our cultural perceptions of things, which is, I keep talking about John Keel, he and, some others talked about that our cultural DNA, the way that we live in our culture is the way we project our the way we see things, that during the Cold War, these were flying discs. Okay, back in the 1800s, they were mysterious airships, shaped like a dirigible.
Mm-hmm.
And then now we're into multidimensional, matrix kind of things, for other universes. So, we put our own cultural imprint on these things. And I think in doing so, we create the reality to fit our mold, our own normality bias. Now, Bigfoot guys see Bigfoot. Researchers see ghosts. Ufologists see aliens. Perhaps they're all the same thing.
I agree, and I think it has a lot to do with our perception and our belief in it. It's exactly like what you said. Someone sees Bigfoot, someone tells 20 other people that they saw Bigfoot, then they start seeing Bigfoot too. Just exactly
Right.
The way that the community has evolved as well. Like with Bud Hopkins and his missing time. I know I've mentioned this several times before, and these shows people probably getting tired of me talking about it. But Bud Hopkins created Missing Time and Screen Memories. And no one talked about that before his book Missing Time came out. And then all of a sudden when his book came out, everyone started experiencing missing time. And it's the exact same thing with Whitley Strieber as well. His book Communion. No one talked about gray aliens before his book Communion came out. And then all of a sudden everyone's seeing gray aliens.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of, which came first, the chicken or the egg. That Missing Time come out because Bud Hopkins wrote about missing time, or was missing time always there and nobody really had a label for it? And now there's a label for it. It's like, oh crap, yeah, okay, that's what that is. Missing time. We now have a word for it.
No.
Neurolinguistics, do we speak something into reality, by our perception of it?
I agree. If anyone's got any questions really quick for Trey before I let him go, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for everyone being here and being in the chat. And thanks for coming on, Trey. I really enjoy speaking with you, brother. It's been too long. Let's do it again sooner than later next time.
Thanks, Ryder. It's always an honor and a pleasure, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah, can you let people know where they can find you online or purchase your book? Or are you writing a new book?
Yeah, I'm actually I am writing a new book. Is
Psychic.
my psychic? Yeah. It's like we're both put our heads together right here. And, data will. No, I'm actually my current book, the Meadow Project Exploration through the South Skinwalker Ranch. You can find that on Amazon. Just type in Trey Hudson, it'll pop up. You can go to Trey Hudson-author. That's my Facebook page. I usually hang out there. My new book is I haven't come up with a title yet, but it's going to be broken into 3 parts. Part one is called Congruences, where I'm investigating similar places of high strangeness in the United States. So I've done some kind of cool research on that. I'm going to interview some people that have had some unique experiences. Second part will be called Explorations, which will be some of our further adventures into the meadow and other places. The third part, and this is probably going to make your eyes roll back, is I hope to do some hypnotic regression with some of my team members that have had some remarkable experiences. And also, I've been talking to a remote viewer who's willing to remote view some of these experiences. So that third part will be called Revelations. So it should be, if nothing else, an entertaining read. So I need to get my publisher off my back and go ahead and finish that.
Thanks so much, brother. Joshua says Crowley drew out gray aliens in the early 90s. It wasn't Strieber, but it wasn't called gray aliens back when Crowley drew it out.
That was Lamb during, it wasn't Babylon working. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, thanks, Joshua. Thanks everyone for being here. Really appreciate your time. To purchase Trey's books, the link is in the description. I highly recommend it. I actually have his book downstairs. I didn't have a chance to bring it up to show it to everyone, but it's a really intriguing book, and he actually has evidence to back up what he talks about. And hopefully one of these times I'm going to get you on here and we're going to be able to show the evidence that you captured.
Sure.
How did that show work out?
It crashed and burned. It's such a fickle, Hollywood and television is such a fickle world. So right now I'm not under any kind of contract. So I'm deciding, how do I want to release this? And it's all good.
Yeah, let's bring you back on sometime in the future, because I think that the footage that you have is very compelling. Don't know what it is. No one really knows what it is, but it is definitely very interesting. Please check out his work, and I'm going to bring him back on, and we're going to share that footage with him at the Meadow, because it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, real quick, I'll be presenting at the Phenomenon in Vernal, Utah next week. So I will be showing some of those videos there. So if anybody's out there, just stop by and say howdy.
Thanks so much, Trey. Thanks everyone in the chat. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. I'll be back on Thursday with my series on UFO Doomsday Cults Part 8. It'll be on the I Am Cult from the 30s. Stay well, everyone. I'll see you guys next time.